Every week I wired $400 so my parents could relax. But the day my son turned 7, they skipped his party. When I called, Mom said, "We celebrate real grandkids." My hands shook as I closed every shared account. Less than an hour later, Dad was outside pounding on my door. Every Friday morning, like clockwork, I wired $400 to my parents' account. No questions asked, no thank yous given. It was just expected. My husband had passed away 3 years ago in a car accident, leaving me with our then 4-year-old son, Mason. I was working 2 jobs and still managing to keep us afloat. But somehow, my parents, retired, healthy, and childless, except for me and my brother, had convinced me they needed my help to enjoy life without stress. They had sold their house 5 years earlier and moved into a high-rise condo downtown. Brand new appliances, doorman, gym, rooftop pool. They called it their well-deserved upgrade. I bought the story for 2 years. I bought every story they fed me. Mom said they needed help with HOA fees. Dad claimed his Social Security barely covered groceries. And when they went on cruises or got new phones, I convinced myself they must have found deals. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But cracks started to show last year. Mason had pneumonia around Christmas. I was sleeping on a hospital chair, barely holding it together. When I called them just to let them know what was going on, my mom picked up and asked if I could transfer the money a day early, so they wouldn't be inconvenienced during their getaway. They were going to Vail for a ski trip. Meanwhile, I was rationing out PTO and praying the antibiotics would work fast. So I wired the money. I was so wrapped up in surviving that I didn't have the strength to challenge them. But things shifted this year. I started noticing how many of their Instagram posts were from expensive restaurants and wine tastings. Not a single picture of Mason, though he's their only grandson. They never commented on the photos I sent them, never FaceTimed, never asked if he needed anything. I began to wonder what they really thought of us. Then came Mason's 7th birthday. We planned it for a Saturday. Backyard cookout, bouncy castle, my brother and his wife came, some friends from school, and even my Aunt Lisa flew in from Seattle. I texted my parents the week before, then again 3 days before. No response. The morning of the party, I called. Voicemail. They didn't show up, not even a card. After everyone left, I sat on the couch staring at the leftover cake. Mason asleep upstairs, and called them again. Mom finally answered. "We don't do that kind of thing anymore." That's what she said. When I asked what kind of thing, she said, "Kids' parties." Then she said, "We celebrate real grandkids." Took me a second. Real grandkids? What does that even mean? I asked her what she meant. She said it was time I stopped pretending and that Mason was never really theirs. Then she hung up. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear. My heart was pounding. Mason's father is dead, and my parents had always claimed to love him. They had accepted Mason when he was born, hadn't they? Apparently not. I stood up, walked to my laptop, logged into every shared account, savings, family cell plan, a travel rewards card. I was dumb enough to co-sign with them. One by one, I closed them, transferred the money out of the savings account, froze the credit card, canceled the next Friday's wire transfer. It was done. But less than an hour later, I heard pounding on the front door. It was my dad, red-faced, yelling my name like a madman. My hands shook as I locked the door and pulled Mason away from the window. I had no idea things were about to get worse. He pounded like he was trying to break in. Mason clutched my hand, confused and scared, whispering, "Who is that?" I pulled him behind me and told him to go upstairs and put on a cartoon. He didn't argue. I heard his small feet bolt up the stairs as my father's voice boomed through the door. "Allison, open this damn door!" I froze. Not because I was afraid he'd get in, but because I never expected to hear that kind of rage coming from my father. He'd always been the composed one, smug and passive-aggressive, never loud or confrontational, but now he was stomping on my welcome mat, spitting accusations at the top of his lungs. "You think you can cut us off after everything we've done for you?" My hands were shaking. I quietly locked the deadbolt, even though it was already latched. I didn't know what he was capable of. I backed away and grabbed my phone, started recording. I wanted proof. Something told me this wasn't going to be the last time. He didn't stop yelling. said I was being selfish, that Mom was devastated, and that I was ruining the family. He called me ungrateful more than once, said I was punishing them because I was jealous of their retirement lifestyle. That part almost made me laugh. They had me convinced they were barely scraping by, and now he was shouting about his lifestyle like I'd taken a yacht away. Then he said something that made my stomach twist. You think you can erase us from your life and keep our money? Our money? The way he said it, like everything I'd given them was part of a contract. Like I owed them a lifetime subscription to my bank account just because they raised me. I called Jake. He picked up right away and asked what was going on. I didn't even have to explain much. Just told him Dad was outside screaming and that Mason was upstairs scared. I told him what Mom said on the phone about Mason not being a real grandkid. There was a pause. They said that Jake's voice dropped. I could tell he was already in his car. 10 minutes later, I saw him pull up. He didn't even glance at Dad, just walked past him and knocked on my door. I let him in. He hugged me tight, then looked around and asked where Mason was. I told him he was upstairs, probably still watching TV. Jake stepped back outside. I stayed by the door, but didn't open it all the way. I watched through the crack as Jake confronted Dad. You need to leave right now. Dad laughed, like Jake was just being dramatic. I'm serious, Jake said. You're scaring Mason. If you don't leave, we're calling the cops. You're siding with her? Dad's voice cracked. Jake didn't say anything. He just stared at him until Dad finally threw his hands up and stormed off, muttering about how ungrateful we both were. I watched him disappear down the driveway and finally exhaled. Inside, Jake and I sat at the table. I showed him the transfer history. Every weekly $400 I'd sent for the last 2 years. I showed him the texts I'd sent about Mason's party, the ones Mom ignored. They told me they were broke, he said. That's why I gave them $10,000 last year. 10,000? Yeah. They said they'd sell the car if I didn't help. We just stared at each other. Then he said something I didn't expect. I want it back, all of it, and I'm giving you half. That money was supposed to be for family, not for cruises and spa weekends. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know how to feel. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone in this. That night, Mason came downstairs in his pajamas and asked if Grandpa was gone. I nodded. He asked why he was yelling. I didn't know how to explain that the people who raised me were not the people I thought they were. Some people don't know how to be kind, even when you love them, I said. He thought about it for a second and said, I'm glad Uncle Jake came. Me too, I told him. But in my gut, I knew this wasn't over. They weren't going to let go that easily. The next morning, I woke up to 22 missed calls, 12 from Mom, 6 from Dad, and 4 from numbers I didn't recognize. There were also 3 long emails sitting in my inbox, all from Mom, each more dramatic than the last. She said I'd humiliated them, that I'd made my father physically ill with stress, that Jake had disrespected the family and turned into a traitor, and that they couldn't believe I would steal their retirement fund. Retirement fund. That was how she described the savings account I had opened in my name and added them to. She said I had broken her heart, that I had no idea how hard it was to raise a child alone, that I was turning Mason against them and damaging him psychologically by filling his head with poison. I wanted to scream or cry or laugh, anything but sit there reading her words like they were supposed to mean something now. Jake came by later that day. He brought Mason a new set of Legos and pulled me aside, said he had called Mom, that he asked for his $10,000 back. She told me to sue her, he said. I blinked. She said that? Yeah. She said if I really wanted it, I could take them to small claims court. She said you and I are trying to destroy them because we're bitter about being middle class. Middle class, I repeated. Jake raised his eyebrows. Apparently that's an insult now. We both sat down. He told me he'd already spoken to a lawyer friend from college, that technically he could get the money back because there was an email trail, and he was going to try. Then he said something else. Mom and Dad told Aunt Lisa not to come to Mason's party, said it was going to be uncomfortable because of family tension. That's why she looked confused when she got here. She didn't understand what they meant. They lied to her, too. I didn't know what to say. I'd been so caught up in my own disappointment that I hadn't considered how far this went. They were managing everyone's perceptions, painting me and Jake as ungrateful kids while collecting sympathy for themselves. Jake handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a printed bank statement, a joint account in their names. They had over $96,000 sitting in there. No debts, no mortgages, no reason to need either of us. I felt something inside me twist. Not anger, not betrayal, just pure humiliation. I gave up things for them, real things, trips Mason wanted to take, a better car, a dental procedure I postponed twice, and the whole time they were lying. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel like crying. Jake looked at me and said, "If they try to show up again, call me. Don't deal with them alone. Not anymore." Later that night, I got another call, this time from a restricted number. I let it go to voicemail. "Hi, Allison. This is Mom." Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "I hope you're happy with the mess you've made. If you want to apologize, we'll consider listening. Otherwise, don't expect to be welcome at Thanksgiving. You can celebrate with your fake family." That was the moment I knew. They were never going to see Mason again. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me to crawl back and beg. But they had no idea who I had become. They taught me how to protect myself. They just didn't expect I'd ever use those lessons against them. The next week, things got quiet. Too quiet. No calls, no surprise visits. It almost felt like they'd given up. I started letting my guard down, focusing on work, Mason's school projects, and even allowing myself to enjoy a few peaceful evenings. Jake was staying in close contact, and he said his lawyer friend had started the process to recover the $10,000. Still, part of me was waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't take long. Friday morning, the day I used to wire the money, I opened my banking app to check a payment from a client. Right at the top, there was a new transaction. Withdrawal, $1,200. From the savings account I thought I had closed. I froze. I had transferred the funds out and called the bank, but apparently I hadn't removed them as joint holders, and they found a way in. I called the bank immediately. After 2 hours on hold and back and forth with a rep, I got confirmation. The account was technically still open, and since I hadn't removed their access officially, they had every right, legally. I hung up and called Jake. Before I could even finish explaining, he said, "You need to see this. I'm coming over." When he got to my house, he handed me a stack of envelopes. He'd picked up the mail from the condo mailbox he used to share with our parents when he lived there. One of them was addressed to him from a debt collector. Not his debt, our parents. Inside was a notice about an unpaid private loan they had taken out 2 years ago, under both their names. Total balance, $38,000. The lender? Some sketchy boutique finance company known for high-interest emergency loans. Jake said, "I think they used my name as a reference. That's how they got the letter." We started piecing it together. They weren't broke, but they were hemorrhaging money fast. Cruises, shopping, private medical clinics. Not for emergencies, for cosmetic procedures. My mom had gotten some sort of facial surgery in Miami last year. I remembered her saying it was a friend's gift. They had been living beyond their means for a while, but instead of stopping, they latched on to the easiest lifeline, me and Jake. That weekend, I filed a formal account dispute with the bank and froze everything for real. I also changed Mason's school emergency contacts and told them under no circumstances should my parents ever be allowed to pick him up. Then, on Sunday, they showed up again. This time, it was both of them. I saw them through the window first. My mom in her oversized sunglasses, arms folded, Dad in another golf shirt, red in the face already. I didn't open the door. Jake arrived 5 minutes later. I hadn't even called him. He just had a feeling. They started yelling, accusing him of stealing me away from them. They said he was manipulating me, that I'd turned against blood. Dad said he wanted the $12,200 back, acting like it was theirs by right. Mom shouted that if I didn't want to be part of the family, fine, but that I couldn't take Mason with me. That's when Jake lost it. He stepped between them and the door and said, "If you ever talk about taking her kid again, I swear to God." They went silent. Even my dad looked startled. And then, completely unexpected, Mason came downstairs and looked out the window. I saw his face drop. He ran back upstairs. I went after him, and when I caught up, he was in the closet with his hands over his ears. That was it. I ran back downstairs, opened the door for 1 second, and said the only thing I was going to say. "You don't get to scare my son. Get off my property. Don't come back." My mom tried to respond, but I closed the door. Jake stayed with us that night. Neither of us said much. But in the morning, he made a call, not to a lawyer, to his bank. He had decided to file a formal demand for the $10,000, but he also did something else. He contacted the finance company that issued our parents the loan and offered to buy the debt privately. "What are you doing?" I asked him. "Making sure they learn," he said. "They never taught us boundaries, so now we show them what consequences look like. They wanted a war. They're about to get one, but on our terms." I didn't even know you could buy someone's debt until Jake explained it. He'd researched everything, the laws, the loopholes, the process. That boutique finance company was happy to sell the loan off. They didn't care who bought it, just that someone paid them most of what was owed. Jake negotiated it down to $31,000 and signed the paperwork the next day. Now, instead of owing a faceless corporation, our parents owed Jake. They had no idea. He waited until everything was finalized. Then he sent them the letter. It was short and brutal. It said the debt had been transferred and the new creditor expected repayment. And at the bottom, he signed his full name. I didn't know what reaction I expected. Screaming, threats, begging, but it was something else entirely. Silence. For a full week. No calls, no emails, no unannounced visits, nothing. Then Jake got a letter, handwritten, from Mom. She said she couldn't believe he would stoop so low, that he was no longer her son, that I had poisoned him, that our family had been fine until we decided to rebel. It was page after page of delusion, not a single word of apology, just excuses, guilt trips, and the same old manipulation. She said Mason would grow up to hate me, that we'd regret this, that we had no idea what real sacrifice looked like. Jake read it once and threw it away. We didn't talk about it after that. What was there to say? The revenge wasn't even satisfying. It just felt necessary, like cutting off a limb to stop an infection from spreading. But we weren't done yet. Jake pulled $10,000 out of his savings and gave it to me in cash. "This was your money to begin with," he said. I tried to say no, but he didn't let me. He said he'd rather Mason have it than see it rotting in a condo where no one cared he existed. We used part of it to fix up the car. Mason's dentist appointment got rescheduled. I bought him a telescope he'd been asking about for months, not out of guilt, out of pure joy. Watching his face light up when he saw the moon through the lens made me feel like myself again, like a real parent. Like I wasn't surviving anymore, I was living. But then 2 days later, Mason came home from school with something tucked in his backpack. A card. It was from my parents. They had dropped it off at the school's front desk, pretending it was for the birthday boy. Inside was a single sentence. "You'll regret teaching him to hate us." There was no return address, no signature, just the same handwriting from Mom's letter. I saw red. I drove to the school the next morning and told them exactly what had happened. They apologized over and over and said it wouldn't happen again. I updated all the emergency contact forms again. I even talked to the school counselor and explained everything. She promised to flag any attempts at contact. When I got home, I packed up every photo of them in the house. Wedding photos, baby pictures, family vacations, every reminder. I put them all in a box and drove it to Jake's garage. He was waiting with a bottle of wine and a small bonfire pit. We burned it all. Every picture, every fake memory, every lie. That night, Mason asked if Grandma and Grandpa were ever coming back. I said no, and he just nodded. Then he asked if we could look at Saturn through his telescope. We stayed out there for almost an hour. He kept saying it looked like it was smiling. And maybe, just maybe, it was. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not like the calm before a storm. More like the end of a noise you've lived with so long, you forgot it wasn't supposed to be there. No more screaming, no more guilt, no more lies and envelopes. For the first time in years, there was space to breathe. Jake sent a final notice to our parents a few days after the bonfire. It said they had 90 days to begin repayment, or he would file a lien against the condo. There was no emotional language, just terms, just law. They didn't respond. We didn't expect them to. I took Mason on a road trip that weekend, just the two of us. We drove up the coast, stayed in a cheap little motel, ate pizza in bed, and hunted for shells along the beach. He told me it was the best weekend of his life. I believed him. It was definitely one of mine. When we got back, there were 2 voicemails waiting on the home line. One from Mom, one from Dad. Mom said she didn't recognize the woman I'd become, that I'd let bitterness and jealousy rot my soul, that she hoped I'd raise Mason better than I turned out. Dad's was quieter. He said he was disappointed. That family is supposed to forgive, that I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. I didn't listen to either message all the way through. I deleted them both. I changed my number that same night. The next morning, I messaged Jake and told him I was done. Not in a temporary, emotional way, permanently. No more middle ground, no updates, no second chances. I had given them 2 years of financial support, countless sacrifices, and far too many pieces of myself. And in return, they humiliated me, dismissed my son, and tried to twist every boundary I put in place. There's no going back, he said. Good. Then he said he talked to the lawyer about the lien. 3 weeks later, he served them the formal notice. They showed up one last time. I wasn't home. Jake was. He told me later that Dad stood there silent for most of it. Mom did all the talking. Accusations, blame, the usual. She demanded to know where I was. Jake told them I'd made my choice, that they weren't welcome anymore. She said, "So that's it? She cuts us off and hides behind you?" Jake didn't argue. She said, "We were good parents." And Jake said, "No, you were just parents. There's a difference." That was it. They haven't contacted me since. Not a text, not a letter, not a third-hand message through a cousin, nothing. I saw a photo of them a month ago, tagged in someone else's social media, still in that same condo, still wearing matching tennis gear like they just walked off a cruise. But they looked older, smaller, like something had shrunk in them. I showed Mason the photo, asked him if he remembered them. He looked at it for a second and said, "That's the lady who was mean about my birthday, right?" I nodded. He didn't ask anything else, just went back to his Legos. That night, I lay in bed and realized I felt no sadness, no guilt, just relief. My parents are gone. Not dead, but gone in the way people go when they choose themselves over everyone else again and again. And I don't miss them. I never will.